I was 16 when he cornered me in the hallway outside my mother's classroom in Sacramento, California. His voice low and fierce. He said, "Don't embarrass the family name." His eyes bore into mine like headlights, cold and unyielding. I swallowed hard, my palms slick against my backpack straps. In that moment, I felt every expectation weighing me down. The surname on my diploma, on our mailbox, on the invitations to charity galas where I was never meant to speak. I nodded and turned away, but inside me something cracked. The name he spoke of was supposed to be mine to bear with pride, but it felt like a shackle tightening around my future. Weeks later, I sat at a worn oak desk in my bedroom, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across my textbooks. I hated math, and the history of California nearly put me to sleep. But that day I was consumed by a different calculation. How many ways could I redefine myself without uttering a word to him? I had watched him for years, the way he commanded respect with a single glance, how people deferred to him at family gatherings in San Francisco's Marina district. He was Uncle Robert, my mother's brother, and he believed our lineage entitled him to dictate our every choice. He didn't know that I had started quietly using my middle name on social media. He didn't know that some nights I signed my notes to friends as Lena Carter instead of Helena Worthington. The new name felt like a whisper of freedom against the roar of his demands. By the time I turned 18, I had saved every dollar from summer jobs at the local diner and tutoring neighbors in algebra. I researched online until my eyes blurred. How to file a name change, what forms to fill out in Sacramento Superior Court, whether I needed to publish my new name in the newspaper. Every late-night browser session was a small rebellion. Each query typed into a search bar, a brick removed from the walls of the prison he'd built around me. I printed county forms, double-checked them against state requirements, and assembled a packet in a crisp folder, my handwriting neat and determined. I imagined the moment I'd walk into that courthouse, speak to the clerk, and leave as someone entirely new, someone untethered from the family name. The morning I went to the courthouse, the air carried a chill that hinted at rain. I parked near the old red brick building, heart pounding so loudly I could barely hear the echoing footsteps in the marble hall. At the glass doors, I paused and took a steadying breath. I told myself this was for me. Not against him, but I could feel the tremor in my hands as I pushed inside. The linoleum floor squeaked under my shoes as I approached the clerk's window. A tired-looking woman adjusted her glasses and asked for my reasons. I told her I wanted to be recognized by my chosen name, Lena Carter, and I handed over the filled forms. She weighed my papers, stamped them, and directed me to room 204 for a hearing in 3 weeks. I said thank you, though my voice was small, and I walked away lighter than I had felt in years. Every day until the hearing, I braced for someone to discover what I planned. I imagined Uncle Robert storming into my room, storming the courthouse, demanding to know why I dared to step out from under his shadow. I practiced my statement in the mirror. I no longer wished to carry a name I never chose. My reflection stared back, fierce and resolute. At night, I dreamed of open doors and silent hallways, a world in which I answered only to myself. In those dreams, each time someone called me Lena, I felt a warmth spread through my chest, as though the name itself was healing a wound I had carried since childhood. The hearing was brief. I sat beside my father, who gave me a reassuring squeeze of his hand when my name was called. The judge, an older man with silver hair, looked over my paperwork and asked if I understood the consequences. I nodded and told him I did. When he granted my request, I felt a rush of air fill the room. The judge said, "Your name is now Lena Carter," and those words echoed like a bell tolling the end of a long imprisonment. I left the courthouse, clutching the stamped decree, rain falling softly on my coat as I stepped into the freedom I had fought for. Returning home that afternoon, I walked past the grand entryway of our family's Victorian house as though it belonged to someone else. I bypassed the parquet hallway where Uncle Robert might be waiting to confront me. Up the stairs, I unlocked my bedroom door, closed it behind me, and looked in the mirror. The reflection was the same face I'd always known, but the name beneath, it was mine entirely. I tore off the old nameplate from my dresser, leaving only the bar where Helena Worthington had hung for years. I placed a new engraving in its place. Lena Carter, each letter a small declaration of independence. That night, I emailed close friends, teachers, and my part-time employer, informing them of my new name. The replies were swift and supportive. "Congratulations. That's amazing. You're so brave." But I didn't tell them about the fear that had followed me every step of the way, the worry that Uncle Robert would lash out, or that my family would disown me. I typed the emails and hit send. Each click a heartbeat. When I finally lay down to sleep, I felt a calm I had never known. The walls of expectation had fallen, and in their place stood a path I had carved myself. He hasn't spoken to me since. At every family event, he avoids my gaze, treats me like a stranger. Some relatives whisper, others look at me with pity or confusion, but I refuse to feel shame. I carry my name with pride now, Carter, not Worthington, and every time I sign a document, every time I answer a call, I am reminded that I chose this identity. He said don't embarrass the family name, but he never understood that true honor comes from being true to yourself. And in registering my own last name, I found the courage to live as I was always meant to be. Weeks turned into months, and I settled into life as Lena Carter with a strange combination of exhilaration and longing. The courthouse decree felt like a passport to a new world, one in which I answered only to myself, but the day-to-day reality was more nuanced than I had imagined. I walked the halls of Sacramento City College with the swagger of someone reinvented, my student ID bearing my new name like an emblem of hard-won freedom. I registered for psychology classes that fascinated me more than any family business seminar ever could, and I learned quickly that information has power when wielded with empathy. I made friends whose loyalty felt less brittle than social connections bound by family pedigree. At the local coffee house where I worked part-time, I introduced myself as Lena to new regulars who quietly marveled at my confident voice and deeply kind smile. I reveled in small victories, correcting professors when they called me Helena, receiving mail at my apartment addressed to Carter in crisp, official letters, and logging into online portals without cringing at the sight of my old surname. Yet every afternoon, I faced a familiar ache when I passed my childhood home on F Street and caught a glimpse of its blue gables through dense oaks. I yearned to tell my mother I was okay, that I hadn't turned my back on her or on our shared memories, but I feared her disappointment. Our weekly phone calls drifted toward shallow topics, weather forecasts, the health of her roses, and I changed the subject sharply whenever she asked about family dinners. She didn't ask about Aunt Mariah's surgery or Uncle Robert's sudden business trip to Europe. She seemed content to maintain a distance that broke my heart. At T21, I landed an internship at the San Francisco Behavioral Health Center. My supervisor, Dr. Kim, had a reputation for mentoring passionate students. On my first day, she introduced me as Lena Carter and smiled as if she recognized something brave in my choice. The center's corridors smelled faintly of antiseptic and strong coffee, and I shadowed clinicians who listened to patients recount trauma and resilience. I learned that names carry stories, both spoken and hidden, and I grew more curious about the weight that family histories impose. On breaks, I scrolled through genealogical records from my mother's side, searching for answers to questions I no longer dared to ask aloud. I discovered that our ancestors had emigrated from the East Coast generations ago, but the details were murky, lost in fires, floods, and relocations. Working with veterans and survivors, I witnessed firsthand how identity and the stories tied to a name can heal or harm a person. That realization fueled my desire to earn a graduate degree and specialize in trauma-informed counseling. That summer, I received a wedding invitation in the mail, embossed and heavy. Alice Worthington and Eric Chen were to be married in late August. Alice was my childhood friend, the daughter of Uncle Robert's elder sister. I stared at the elegant script, my name spelled Carter, but her family name leapt off the invitation like a challenge. Rumors whispered through social media about an extravagant affair at the Fairmont in San Jose. I hesitated, torn between my desire to support Alice and the dread of facing Uncle Robert in his element, surrounded by family who viewed my choice as a betrayal. I called my mother, voice wavering, and told her I'd think about it. She sighed, long and sorrowful, and said, "It's your decision, sweetheart." That moment felt like permission and abandonment all at once. On the evening of the wedding, I drove down Interstate 80, overhead lights guiding me toward family. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I rehearsed polite phrases. "Congratulations. I'm happy for you. Thank you for inviting me." My reflection in the rearview mirror looked like a stranger, someone poised, assured, yet haunted by anxiety. I parked in the valet area and stepped onto plush carpeting. The lobby buzzed with laughter and music, and I heard my name announced. As a guest of the bride's side, Lena Carter. Heads turned. Some frowned, others raised curious eyebrows. I spotted my mother near the refreshment table, her eyes brimming with tears and pride. She hugged me without a word and whispered, "Thank you for coming." That brief gesture steadied me, a reminder that love can transcend names and expectations. Later that night, under the glow of lanterns in the rose garden, I found Alice at a quiet fountain. She hugged me tightly and said, "You look radiant." I laughed, the sound unsteady with relief. We sat on a stone bench while the water whispered behind us. She talked about her hopes for marriage, the fears she carried about living up to family traditions, and I confessed my own lingering doubts about belonging. In that moment, our stories converged, two young women navigating the weight of worth and expectation. We chose new paths, different names, but our friendship bridged a divide. In that rose-scented night air, I felt a surge of purpose, to build a life worthy of the name I chose. I arrived at Stanford University on a crisp autumn morning, the air carrying a faint hint of eucalyptus and possibility. My heart thudded as I crossed the quad, clutching a folder of research proposals under my arm, each page stamped with my chosen name. The banners fluttering in the breeze welcomed a new cohort of graduate students, and I inhaled deeply, determined to stake my claim in this world I had fought so hard to join. Every step reminded me of the days I spent poring over genealogical records and courthouse forms, the nights I lay awake haunted by the fear of discovery, and the moment rain fell softly on my coat as I exited the courthouse a free woman. Now, free or not, I faced a different challenge, proving that a name can carry power when you infuse it with purpose. I made my way to the Department of Psychology building, where faculty and fellow students gathered to introduce themselves. When I stepped forward to speak, I felt a familiar tremor, but I steadied my voice and said, "Hello, I'm Lena Carter," as if every syllable were a declaration. Their polite applause washed over me like warm sunlight, and for the first time since my name change, I allowed myself to believe in the promise of a future shaped by my own hands. The first few weeks passed in a whirlwind of seminars, research, meetings, and late nights in the lab. I collaborated with Dr. Patel on a study examining the long-term effects of childhood identity disruptions on adult resilience. Our project required us to interview participants who, like me, had experienced name changes or family estrangements. In those recorded conversations, I heard echoes of my own story. The anxiety, the relief, the search for self amid shifting expectations. Yet every time I typed my name into the database as Lena Carter, I felt a surge of affirmation, as though I were forging a bond between my past and my present. On Sundays, I drove back to Sacramento to visit my mother, and our walks through the rose gardens behind her house became a ritual of quiet confession. She never asked me to abandon my identity, only to remember where I came from. I told her about the interviews, the preliminary findings, and the thrill of presenting at the end of term symposium. Her eyes filled with pride and acknowledgement that my name had grown beyond a simple word on a piece of paper. Then came the conference. Invitation I never expected, a prestigious regional symposium in San Jose, focusing on identity and trauma. I submitted an abstract alongside my research partner, outlining how voluntary name changes can serve as acts of self-empowerment rather than mere formalities. When acceptance emails arrived, I was overjoyed until I read the keynote speaker's name in the program brochure. My heart sank as I realized that Uncle Robert had been invited to deliver the opening address. The same man who had once cornered me in that high school hallway and dictated which future I was allowed to inhabit was now a celebrated figure at the very event where I was meant to shine. Panic coiled in my stomach as I considered canceling my presentation, but I remembered my mother's reassurance. The year I spent building credibility under my own name, and the patients whose stories had become intertwined with mine. I vowed to attend, even if it meant facing him from the audience, every nerve in my body bracing for confrontation. The day of the symposium dawned gray, as though the sky sensed my turmoil. I arrived early, securing a seat in the front row to watch Dr. Robert Worthington speak. His presence on stage was commanding, tailored suit, confident posture, voice modulated to convey authority. He began by extolling the virtues of family legacy, using our shared surname as a testament to perseverance and prestige. I felt a tightening in my chest as I listened, his words twisting the very essence of what I had rejected. When he concluded, to polite applause, an announcement called for the next speaker, Lena Carter. My jaw clenched, but I stood, smoothing the front of my blouse and stepping to the podium. The audience shifted, puzzled by the shift from legacy to liberation. I introduced myself, acknowledging my former name only briefly before diving into the heart of my research. As I spoke of choice, identity, and the courage it takes to redefine oneself, I watched Uncle Robert in the audience. His arms were crossed, and his face remained impassive, yet I sensed the first flicker of doubt in his eyes. My voice grew steadier with each slide, and by the time I shared a de-identified clip from an interview with a young veteran who had changed her surname to escape trauma, the room was silent with empathy. After my presentation, a line formed of attendees eager to ask questions and congratulate me. Colleagues praised the clarity and poignancy of my findings, and I felt a swell of pride that had nothing to do with inherited status. At the reception that followed, I saw Dr. Worthington standing alone by the hors d'oeuvres table. I approached him, every instinct urging me to turn away, but I reminded myself that I no longer lived in fear of his approval or disapproval. I cleared my throat and said, "You spoke beautifully about legacy today." He raised an eyebrow, surprised by my civility. I continued, "Legacy is important, but so is the legacy we choose for ourselves." He studied me, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly as he recognized the woman I had become. After a moment, he nodded and extended his hand. "Congratulations on your work, Lena," he said quietly. Our hands shook in a gesture that felt more symbolic than any courtroom decree. Walking back to my car that evening, I felt the weight of the day settle into something lighter, almost buoyant. The rain had begun to fall, tapping a steady rhythm on the pavement as if to underscore the cleansing power of choice. I opened the passenger window and let droplets slide across my face. My phone buzzed with messages, invitations to co-author an article, requests to speak at other events, and a single text from my mother that read, "You were magnificent. Love you." I typed my reply in the voice I had fought for. "Thank you. Love you too." As I drove home through winding streets lined with illuminated redwoods, I pondered the journey that had led me here from a frightened teenager under my uncle's glare to a woman who had claimed her name and reshaped her destiny. The road ahead was uncharted, but for the first time, I felt prepared to navigate it as Lena Carter, not as an heir to anyone else's expectations but as the architect of my own story. And in that realization, I discovered the true power of a name chosen and the freedom that comes with standing firmly in one's own truth.